Hello, I'm Roger Bisby, and in this video I want to show you how to install a complete shower room, start to finish, the modern way with no pipework showing. Now this is particularly relevant in this design for people that want to take out the bath and put in a full-size shower. So what I've learned over the years more than anything else is that you've got to plan the bathroom right. If you do that from the very beginning, you can make sure there aren't any surprises, and that means getting your first fix right, getting those pipes in so that they coincide absolutely perfectly with where you want to put in your shower, your basin and your WC. So you can see here we've got all the dimensions. We're not going to be undone by things not quite fitting, and it's a full scale drawing. It's showing the elevations and the plan, and we can make sure that everything is in the right place. That means our supply pipes and also our waste pipes. Now the first job that I've got to do is to put some elements board onto this wall, and to do that I'm going to dot and dab it with KST cement based adhesive. Now you can build that out to as much as 50 millimeters, which is great because if you've got a rough old wall, it's a bit out of plumb and so on, you can do a lot of your preparation, get it absolutely perfect for tiling. And also you can adjust the wall thickness slightly so that it suits things like your shower tray and all the rest of it. So that's not going anywhere, and once I've finished putting in the mechanical fixings, I'm then going to cover the joints. Now in the wet area I'm going to use Pro Seal and a flexible waterproof neoprene tape over those joints, but in the areas outside of the wet area I'm going to use an alkali resistant scrim tape and what I've got left of that KST adhesive. So the boards that I've used here are the 2.4 by 600, but Abacus also make this elements board in a lot of different sizes and a lot of different thicknesses, which is really useful when you're trying to build out shower areas and build up levels on floors. So here's a little tip on setting out that I always try to just take account of, and that's when you're using these single fall trays, you've got a plastic upstand there, and if you put that in front of the wall, you'd have to just dub out your tiles slightly to cover that upstand. But what you can do is use a 6mm board to start with in here. That's a 12mm board, so 6mm board just gives you that little recess there. It means that plastic upstand can go tucked away nice and discreetly there, and this tile will then just go over and fall exactly where you want it, just behind that drain. Now this is all going to be taped up in the installations, so none of that will leak. All the water, if it ever did get behind these tiles, would just come down and find its way into the drain. So it's a great solution, neat way of doing it, and it saves you any trouble. From my drawing here, I can see exactly where I've got to go with my pipe work. So the supply pipe is easy. That's just coming in hot and cold over there, and that's accessible. That's going to be accessible either through the back of the cabinet or from under the shelf. So we can always isolate the supplies into the bathroom. If you can't, you might want to put this in an airing cupboard or somewhere like that outside of the bathroom. Now, the waste pipe is generally a little bit more problematic because getting water away is more of a challenge. But here we've got the waste pipes coming up through the floor, we've got the basin waste in there, we've got the bath waste, or the shower waste as it is this time, 40mm in that position. We've got a branch for the WC, but sometimes of course the soil pipe is outside the building, you're going straight through the wall and out. Sometimes you've got to work it out and get it in through the inside of the building. So every job's different, and that is really the plumber's skill, working out how to get that water away. When you're putting your frames in, you're building your pre-wall, the place to start is with the WC, because that's the largest waste connection we've got, and really wherever the WC soil pipe branches is going to determine how far out we go from the wall. Now, in this case, with this handy bent connection, we've got 3 different positions. We can move it in or out a little bit, and we've actually managed to get this in nicely just behind there, which means we've got 205 millimeters out from the wall. Now, if it was longer, we've got some longer bolts to deal with that, to fix it at the top, but there are some shorter bolts here as well. So we're covering all eventualities. And if we weren't going with a bent connection, by the way, this will also go down through the floor if you wanted to, but if we were going straight out, then we've got an extension piece here. Now the great thing, the thing that I really like about this is because they provided you with all those options, it means actually that you'll end up not using one of these components. So this is a rare time when if you end up with things left over in the box, you don't need to worry. Now, we've determined how far out from the wall we want to go, but we also need to know how high we're going to go. And you can see that they've put a mark on this frame to tell you where that 1 meter height is, which is more or less the average position that people would want it in height-wise. But of course, what we've got to remember is we're going to build this floor up. We've got some elements board to go on here, we've got the underfloor heating to go on here, and we've also got the tiles. So that's going to raise this up. So work out what your finished floor height is. In this case, I know that our build up is going to be 30 millimeters. So I'm going to raise this frame up by another 30 millimeters. So that will be 1 meter and 30. And I do that by means of these adjustable feet here. So having measured it, if you find your floor is slightly out of level, of course you can adjust it just to get it back in level, and then it's going to be plumb as well. What I've done here is I've put it on that first rib, if you like, that just clips into there, and the clip goes over the top to hold it securely in position. But if I wanted to bring this frame back a little bit more, if I was tight for space, I could actually bring it back to there or even to there, but of course it's starting to push on the branch there. So that just gives me a little bit of room. I mean, better to have a little bit of space to work in. Put that on there, clip it on there, and then when we go to put the other bit in there, it means we've got something secure to push against. Here we've got a pair of rubber feet which go on the bottom to stop the sound transmission through the floor. 70% of the loading on this frame is down into the floor, so we've got a good solid floor, but that still leaves 30% pulling away from the wall, if you like, and we've got some bolts here to fix it to the wall, but also we have a foot which is adjustable around here. But what we've got here is a stud that's going all the way across, so we're going to pick that up. But if you don't have that, you can also put a piece of unistrut across the wall to spread the load, and there's a special fixing to put into the unistrut. But we're going to use this, we're going to put it into the timber, and we can orientate that whichever way round we want. But the good thing is that the top of this bracket here comes in line with the top of that shelf. So if you were going to put a shelf across there or something like that, you wouldn't have to then put another piece of timber on to plant it. So simple little thing, but it makes a difference. So we've got our 2 different size bolts, and all we've got to do is work out which one's best for the job. Well, we're just on the cusp there. We could use either one, but I might as well use the long one. Where possible, I like to construct my pre-wall on the floor so I can get the whole thing squared up. It's all basic carpentry, just cutting the timber, screwing it together, and you have to make sure that it's set out so that it can take whatever you're going to put in there. In this case, we're going to put in mounting frames and so on. And these have got a little bit of adjustment on them anyway, so it's not that critical. All I have to do now is screw it so that it's exactly the same distance from the wall as the WC frame, which is the thing I'm setting it out by. Now you could construct the whole pre-wall and then plumb it up afterwards, but what I like to do is just pre-plumb some of these sections because I'm going to crimp these fittings. I'm not going to use push fit on this. I like the crimp system. It's becoming more and more popular. More and more plumbers are going over to it because there's no O-rings. Once it's crimped, and I think it's a far more reliable system. But it does mean that rather than having to get round and work with those crimpers in position, I can actually just pre-plumb that onto the plates and then run it in. Now it goes without saying that when you're drilling into the floor or into the walls, you've got to avoid any pipes, so it pays to know where they are. And also when I'm just fixing this frame into the floor, I'm just going to coincide it with a joist so we get a nice firm fixing. Now there was a time when I used to fit basins and just make up bits of stolaging, but this basin frame has made that completely unnecessary. It's made for the job and it's got all the connections, everything is ready to go. So you'll see how this fits together, but you wouldn't think I could get too excited about a basin frame, but I think this is a major step forward. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to join these pipes to the basin frame before I put it in position so that I don't have to worry about trying to crimp in position. And you can do this with PTFE tape, but I actually prefer to use this Loctite 55 thread. I just think it makes a more secure fitting. So the only thing is when I construct these frames on the floor, I just hope my measurements are right. It's always a little nervous moment, but I prefer to leave a couple of mil to shim out than I would to make it too tight. Doesn't matter how many times you do it, it's still just a little bit of yes when it goes right. Now the great thing about this crimp system is that you can see from that hole there when the pipe is all the way into the fitting, so you're not having to hope for the best or guess it. So when we pop it into the crimping tool, we'll locate that black shoulder on it. We're in position, nothing slipped out, just give it a little push just to make sure. And that pop is proof that it's actually reached exactly the right pressure. And look at that joint, that's absolutely beautiful. There's no O-rings involved in that, doesn't swivel, it's locked in there nicely. So here I'm a convert. Now I've got the basin plumbed up and I've got the WC plumbed up, I'm going to do the shower valve. Now this is the mounting plate that I'm going to use for the shower valve. It gives a really solid mounting for all kinds of valves and it's adjustable. So again, so long as we've got enough room, we'll just give it a quick check. Yep, that's tight, but it's fine. And if it was a little bit loose, we could adjust it on the back there on the slots. So the next thing I need to know is where you really need to get hold of your shower valve, whatever it is. And this is the valve that I'm using. So that's going to go on there. And we just need a bit of depth planning here because obviously we know what we're going to have in the way of board and tiles. If the tiles are coming anywhere around there, we'll be fine. But I know now, because I've done a few of these in the past, that I've got to set this back 25 millimeters from the front on those brackets there. Now I like to get these things in level. There's no real need because actually there's adjustment for the shower valve on that plate. So long as we're there or thereabouts, we can screw that to the board. You know, I'd believe in evolution if plumbers had 3 hands, but I've been doing this job so long and still struggling, waiting for that extra hand. Okay, I've got to this stage now. I've got it all framed out, all piped up, ready to go. I'm just going to test it just to make sure it holds up to pressure. I can run the waste pipes in then. And what you can see here is I've put a frame around here because we're going to put some reveals in here and a shelf across there for putting a mirror in. So that will just finish off the boarding nicely. So there are lots of different ways of doing this waste from the basin, and you'll see how this trap works. Very, very clever trap in the wall, if you like. But this is what comes out here, and they supply with it a 2-inch or a 50 millimeter connector, which is compression, mechanical fitting there. That can go on to obviously a mechanical fitting or whatever you like, but what I'm going to do is solvent weld it on with the reducer. So we've got a 40 mil or 1.5 inch pipe coming out of here, and personally I much prefer to put an 1.5 inch pipe onto a basin waste. I know, you know, 32 mil 1.25 inch is the standard, but they clog up. So for me, I'd like to start a campaign right now to change to 1.5 inch for basin wastes. You heard it here first. So just before we start boarding up, we're just going to put this on the front. This will allow us to board around this flush valve here. And down the bottom, very important to put your debris stoppers in, and you'll see the relevance of this in a minute. So a very important component. If you've got your pan, you can check the dimensions of the holes. Most of them I find these days are the inner holes, but it's always worth checking, because if you then find out that it's the outer ones, you've got to recut a couple of holes there. So here's the cabinet frame. That's going to go in here now. Now I'm ready to board around that, but I just say at this point that you don't need to have that cabinet there. The whole thing is modular. You can configure it however you like. Obviously you wouldn't want the cabinet inside the shower area, so this ducket here for the soaps and shampoos and so on is pretty much where it's going to go. But we can have the mirror, we can change around anyway. That's my point, is that it's all configurable at this stage. Of course, a bit of a schoolboy error. It always helps to know where the studs are before you do this. Now I've finished applying the Pro Seal and the waterproof tape to all the areas which are within the wet area. Anywhere where it's critical, anywhere that I think water might be able to seep down through the grout lines and cause problems, is covered with this waterproof solution. It actually expands. The tape is flexible so that if there's any kind of movement, the building dries out, as all buildings do, move slightly, this tape will actually take up that amount of movement. And also the seal expands at exactly the same rate, so it just means that all these joints are covered completely. Now I'm using Elements board here, and this is an insulated board, a tile backing board, and the idea is that it just gives you that little bit of a warmer surface, stops the condensation on the tile so much, and it also has this polymer face which is ideal for tiling onto. So we've got a completely waterproof surface here. Water will not get through that, and of course by the time we've got the tiles on the grout, the sealant, we really have a belt and braces approach to the whole job. Now some people would use plasterboard, some people use all manner of things, but I've been using this for a number of years, and quite honestly, if my customers don't want to use this, then I really don't want to know. So that's taken care of the wet area, and you might wonder why I need to carry on with the elements board across the rest of the room. After all, it's not getting soaked in quite the same way, but I think that once you're using the elements board, you might as well carry on through the whole thing rather than changing over to something like water resistant plasterboard, which is a bit of a pain to work with. It's dusty, it's messy, and it doesn't provide anywhere near the same kind of quality surface that this does. So in this area, I'm just covering these fixing points and the joins with an alkali resistant scrim tape, and that will be covered with the tile adhesive. Now we come to the part where we're going to be putting the shower tray in, and this is a problem that plumbers come across all the time: how to get that waste pipe out, how to get it to the soil pipe. Now you can't go notching through the joist. If you've got joists in the way, you've got to run that over the top, and if you've got a concrete floor, you've got to run it over the top. So the solution is to use this raising piece, which is what we call a sub element, and this supports the single fall infinity tray which goes on top. Everything we need to do the job is included in this fixing kit. So I'll just explain what we've got here. This is the trap that comes with the Infinity single fall tray, and this is multi-directional. You can actually go down through the floor, comes out in 2-inch 50 mil. You can go through the floor, or you can go straight out. Now we don't need that one, so we'll blank that off. They give you a blanking plug. I'm going to solvent weld that blanking plug into there. Here I've got a level invert reducer, which means that we can go from 50 mil down to 40 mil, 1.5 inches, and obviously you have to put that level invert reducer at the bottom so you don't finish up with a lip. And also, this is quite handy, if you wanted to come out in 2-inch, you've got this adapter which will come out and it says up there, and what you do is you put that with that at the top and it automatically gives you a 2.5 degree fall, so that gets the fall going the right way. But in this case, what I'm going to do is use the 1.5 inch, solvent weld the whole thing in there. I'll just give myself a dry fit, make sure everything connects up, and then I'll get that solvent welded up. Now when I go to put the trap onto the bottom of the tray, I can just gently lift it up and screw it in. In this little pack is the seal for the trap and also the stainless steel bolts, which we're going to need a little later on. So I'm going to put this seal on at this stage. If you forget it, it's very difficult to do it afterwards. So that just pops around the outside there. On this one, we put the second O-ring, or seal if you like. So just pop that in there for now. And I'll keep the bolts there so I know where they are. So now I'm going to stick down the sub element. Now before you go too far, but this is always a good idea to put a spirit level on there so that you can see whether the floor's level, because if you have to do any bedding up to get that sub element in spot on level, you can do it with the adhesive. Now it's important when you're putting these machine screws in to pull this trap up into place that you don't over tighten those screws. If you've got a torque screwdriver, it's 1 Newton meter, which is absolutely nothing really, but it's okay because we've got an O-ring to seal it here, and on the underside is a big rubber gasket. So if you just get it just firmly up in there, it won't leak. And if you're doing it, make sure you've got all 4 screws in first before you start tightening up. So this back edge takes no load, but in order to keep it back against the wall and well sealed, we put some screws in. There are 2 holes there and I'll also drill one just about in the middle, just to keep it back. So I've got to put the sealant tape over the top of this plastic upstand, but as a belt and braces measure, I'm going to put the sealant, the MD sealant, along the back first, and then I'll screw that tightly back and it will never leak. Now, I have known people throw this bit away, but it's quite important because it is actually the tile guide. It protects debris from going down through the waste, but it also gives the tiler something to tile up to. When we come to doing the wall, we'll have this tile here, which will stop there basically at that level, and then the wall tiles, if I can just lift this one over, we put this 6mm board in and then the 12mm up here to create this very slight recess to stop this tile from kicking out. So you can see how it works there. That's all sealed up with the tape, so there'd be no chance of any water getting in there. If it ever did run down the back of this tile, which is very unlikely, and it got down to there, it would just drip through there and find its way into the drain. So it's important that we don't get rid of this, by the way. You do see people throw that away thinking it's a bit of packing. It's actually the tile guide. We're going to put our trim up to there, the tiler is at least, and then he can tile to there. When the drain cover goes in here, there is an option of different finishes for that. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I did this. This was done by the tiler. I'm not responsible for this bit, but I just wanted to show it to you to say how important it is that you get nice, neat holes, that you do everything as precisely as you can. We don't want a big diamond cut here with an angle grinder. That's not acceptable. On the drawing, it shows that it's been designed in 800 modules. So the first one was the 800 with the WC centered on this tile. The next one is the basin. Again, the basin is centered on that 800, and the final one is the shower over here. That's the third one of the 800, and that is centered on the shower valve and the ducket and everything else. So it looks really good. You don't get that awkward thing where somebody's, oh no, you've got a slither of a tile and where do you put the cut? It's all worked out. So this is for a timber floor that I'm using this primer. If you're going onto concrete, onto a screed or existing concrete floor, then you would use a different primer or no primer at all, just depending on the nature of the floor. And the great thing about bedding this elements board on that KST adhesive is if we've got a slight undulation in the floor, we can take it out now just by thick bedding that adhesive, and that saves the tiler having to do it, because really the standard is plus or minus 1mm, no more than that. So if you can't see daylight under the level, you're fine. This is electric under tile heating, and not everybody has it, but in my experience everybody wants it. And there's just a couple of things you've got to bear in mind with it. It works a lot better when you've got an insulating layer underneath, because it speeds up that warm-up time of the tiles. You don't need to switch it on so early. So this elements board is perfect for that, because it's got that insulated core. It will drive that heat up through the tiles. You get very rapid warm-up. Now, when you're laying it, you need to work out where your supply is coming from, which will be outside the room. That's where it will link in, and then you'll put the thermostat on there. You also put an under tile probe into the floor, so that you can measure the temperature, keep the thing regulated, and avoid putting it underneath basins and a WC and places like that where you're not going to stand, because it's a waste, and sometimes when people put a pan over the top of it, it just cooks in that spot. So keep it where you need it, and just work it out. It's very, very simple to do. And when we put it down, almost immediately we cover it up after testing it. That is, it's important to test it. And then we make sure that it's protected when the tiler comes in to do his bit. Okay, so the rest of the second fix I can do on my own, but when it comes to putting in the glass, I really like a hand with that bit. Now, I've got to admit, I'm always a little bit nervous when I first walk into a bathroom that I've fitted, because I don't know what kind of job the tiler's done. And it's very important, because this whole thing was designed on this modules of 800 tiles, so we could centre one behind the WC, one behind the basin, and one behind the shower, so everything lines up. And I'm happy to say that he's done a great job on this. And because we're having a cabinet over here, you know, you don't need to be absolutely precise, but he has been precise, which I really like. So earlier on you saw me fitting the basin frame, and you might have wondered what that was all about, but you can see now that it's provided the best fixing, really secure, really solid for that basin. But also this is really just a unique feature, if you like, of this frame. Obviously we've got our tappings here ready for the hot and cold supplies, but we've also got here a built-in trap in the wall, which is a piece of genius. If you look at it, if I can get it out, that is the trap. And the idea of this is that you don't have a trap in the furniture itself. It's absolutely clear in there. All we've got is the pipe running into this, so that can be serviced. You know, we can get rid of all the hair and all the gunge out of there and pop it back in, turn it round, and that's located. But even better, from there there's still adjustment on that trap up and down, which means that if there's a slight backfall, and let's face it, who hasn't seen a backfall on a basin waste? If there was a slight backfall, we could just adjust that trap even after it's tiled to make sure that it runs away. So for me, that is such a problem solver that I'm thinking, why wouldn't anybody fit it? So at this point, I'll just show you, I've got the brackets here ready to hang the cabinet on. I've seen people hang cabinets in all kinds of ways in the past, simply because they haven't thought about the fixings. But with this basin frame, we've got that big sheet of plywood and we've got the studs there, so there's a fixing ready-made to put that cabinet on, so no problem there. And the great thing about using that sealant rather than PTFE is that you can actually back it off so that you get it vertical. Now you can see that I'm using the chrome isolating valves here, the standard ones, because this is inside a cabinet. But if we had this on display, no furniture underneath, then I'd want to match it in with the Abacus matte black, which we're using on the rest of the brassware. Now I've shown this before, it's the Abacus Universal Basin Waste, which is a really clever thing. It's two-part, so you can use it for a slotted or an unslotted basin. Obviously this one's in black to match the rest, and you also have a little fit in there to change it into a click if you don't want that fixed one. Now these isolating valves are universal, so you can come out with a bit of 10mm copper with a nut and olive on it, or you can take that off and that gives you a 3/8 thread. But because I've got flexes on here, I want to change it to 1/2 inch, so I just put that bush on and I use this thread sealant again because I love it. Nice tiny squirt in there. On it goes, and hand tight is actually good enough with this thread sealant. You just back it up slightly like that. And continuing the theme with that matte black brassware, we've actually got this Abacus Metro towel rail, which is also matte black. And the great thing here is that we've got 4 tappings in it, so we can use the 50mm centers here with this very nice looking thermostatic radiator valve, so we can bring the pipes out directly behind it, or we could go into the ends with the pipes as you would on a lot of other towel rails. But here's the thing, we want to use this for summer operation, the electric element, and if you look, even that is matched up to the towel rail, and they do it in full color range, so pretty good. So this is just a message for my fellow plumbers out there. I genuinely think that fitting these cisterns in these pre-walls is the simplest job in the world. I absolutely love it. But I know some plumbers aren't familiar with it. And I did get an email from a lady the other day who said she called in a plumber to service the cistern and he wanted to hack all the tiles off a wall, and she thought that was wrong. There is a video that we've made which shows you how to service this cistern, so check that out if you don't know. It's really, really easy to do. And then the other thing is that when you're fitting the pan, there are a few things that you really, really need to take care of. The first is to get this dimension right, because if you look in the instructions, you get that dimension right, the pan will pull in nicely to the wall. If you've got that too far out, it'll always have that little gap and it won't quite work. So 10mm is the space between the back there, or you can measure the 45mm to the groove there. Whatever you do, get that right. And you can wind these bolts in and out, by the way, with a screwdriver to adjust them. So there's a lot of adjustment there, even when you've tiled up. The next thing is, probably the most important thing of the whole installation, is to get this flush pipe and the soil pipe connection cut properly at the right length. Now, what I first do is put that into the wall, just slide it in there, and then I make the tiniest mark. Having got that mark on there, I now put the pipe into the back of the system where it's going to go, put that home. Then, there's my little nick that I made previously. Make another tiny nick there, only small. Now, the difference between those two nicks is what I've got to cut off the pipe. Okay, so that gives us the precise amount between there and the inside of the flush pipe. But, and here's the but, very, very important this bit, take off 3mm, 4mm from that pipe when you do it. And the reason is that if that pipe is over long, there is a little lug inside the flush pipe, and when you tighten the pan back against the wall, this pipe will push past that lug and it can push the O-ring out, and then you'll get a leak. Now, that is the only problem that I've ever encountered with this, is people making that flush pipe too long. So measure it carefully. The way I showed you just now is my preferred method because it always works. Take those 3-4mm off the end of it. So long as you're going in past that O-ring, you're fine, and there is a little bit to spare, so you'll be absolutely fine in doing that. And then when you tighten those bolts and the pan goes back against the wall, you know it's not pushing against that lug. That's all I'm saying. It's very, very important to do that. Same applies when you do this, but it's not quite so critical. But again, you just put it on there, mark it up, put it into the wall, mark it up, cut off the difference, obviously chamfer it down, and put the silicone grease on. Very important. Comes in this little sponge, by the way. It's impregnated with silicone, so you haven't got to go looking for it. You haven't got to use fairy liquid or anything else, and that will be the perfect job. Honestly, you will get no problem if you do that. Now here's an important point. When you put these push rods in, depending on how far away that cistern is from the tiled front, you may have to just snap off a section of these push rods, which is very easy. They're segmented like that, so you can just take that off like that. Same, only different. Put those in, turn them around. Now, the important point is when you do that, you can see that it operates properly, and if they're too long, they won't operate properly. Never leave your fingerprints at the scene. There are various ways of securing these shelves if indeed you want to. Some people put silicone around, but I'd prefer to leave them loose so you can get to anything behind. But a good idea is just to use a bit of Velcro tape. So these are the adjustable feet for the grid. So we just set those to height. Here, we've got a hair trap. Basically, take that out, take that bit out and clean it out, pop it back in. Not a great job, but somebody's got to do it. And then that all sits nicely in there, sealed off. And then the final thing is, so there you are, all finished, and it's a pretty nice looking shower room. And because of all the preparation, all the thought and design that goes into it, and of course the components, not to mention the labour, it's going to remain looking a pretty nice shower room for a long time to come. Now, if you want details of any of the products that have been used to create this beautiful room, it's all in the links below.